Amud Aleph. We are on page 24a, and we are discussing the reason for Reb Meir, who says that you're not allowed to use a animal as a wall for your sukkah. And I did mention yesterday that it does seem surprising that there would be a thought to use this animal as a wall for your sukkah. I mean, it's so unpredictable an animal. It seems like so temporary, and so it definitely seems surprising that it's going to be that there would be even reason to say that it should be kosher. So we were thinking about Rabbi Yehuda's view, who's lenient and says you could use an animal for a sukkah, for a wall. But the truth of the matter is, why did Reb Meir say you can't use it? Reb Meir's reasoning for not being able to use it, the explanation so far that we have, the understanding we have so far, is that it had to do with a rabbinic decree, which also adds to our question. Like, biblically, it's fine to use an animal that's so unpredictable and so unsteady, it's moving, it could leave at any given moment. It's not in your power even. It's so temporary and it's so unpredictable, and it just seems surprising that an animal would be kosher. But the question that I asked yesterday on Reb Yehuda's view, in truth, we should ask it on Reb Meir as well, because Reb Meir just says rabbinically they prohibited it. Biblically, it's a good wall. This is a solid wall. So I was comparing it to the case of the in a case of on the boat, where if it's a wind that knocks it over, it's not a good wall. The wind could knock it over. So why here asking that question? The truth is, it's a question on Reb Meir as well. It's now the truth of the matter is, a lot of the laws of sukkah only apply to the schach, and they don't exactly apply to the walls of the sukkah. So the fact that the wall is more temporary, but the schach is permanent, that is a possibility here of why. As we're just talking about the wall being an animal, but the schach is sturdy. Schach is sturdy. It's the wall that's could move, could go away, could crouch down. But so the wall is not necessarily, doesn't have the same strict rules as the schach of the sukkah. So here you have a case where the schach of the sukkah, the structure is a good structure, at least the frame, but not the wall. The wall seems desperate. So here you see again this concept that it's the schach that's very important to be solid. The walls, it seems like we could be we're somewhat lenient. Like we had a case where the sukkah was on the animal, but there was a permanent schach, and the animal walked into the structure that had the schach, and the sukkah is a moving sukkah, and yet but the schach was very sturdy. You have these scenarios where we see that the Gemara seems to be very lenient about the walls, and it's more that the sukkah, it's more that the schach needs to be more permanent. In any event, it's an interesting thing that we see that these two opinions, both Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda, at least the way the Gemara understood it until now, is that both of them seem to say biblically this is a good wall. Now,
Rabbi,
of course, the case was questionable what the case was, but yeah, but okay, yes, Victor.
So So how do they compare, let's say, this animal where, let's say you have a bush that's growing, nice thick bush,
Uh,
with whatever I don't know what they have in Florida, but in New
right.
England, you have a nice thick bush. And,
I don't know.
it's
You get closer
also
to the bathroom. Don't worry about it. Just take your
pretty
money with you.
permanent, right? And,
Mhm.
so how do they compare that with the animal? In other words, is that somewhere else in the Gemara where they talk about
Yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah. So the next page is going to talk about the talk about using a bush for your walls as well. So that is going to
Yeah,
be
because you could
dealt
have
with.
some insects could come and they could eat they could come eat the thing, and then
Right,
your bush is wide open, and now what? So, we'd
right.
have
The wind
similar.
comes and the branches wave with the wind and so on. So that is the next Mishnah in Gemara
Uh, so they
on
okay.
page
So
24b. So we're getting there. We got all these.
all right.
Yeah. Okay. So the Gemara now is bothered with the fact that the problem with using an animal, we had a brisa that gave a lot of examples. And it said Reb Meir holds you can't use an animal for any of these things. And the brisa mentioned, of course, sukkah can't be a wall for a sukkah, and it can't be a lechi for a mavoy. A lechi was the pole. It can't be used as like a pole for to permit carrying in a mavoy in an alley. And we said it can't be used as a pasin, as a type of pole or a wall type of. It can't be used for a like a V-shaped wall in order to be able to carry the water and a well by a well on Shabbos. So all of these cases were all part of Reb Meir's ruling that an animal can't be used for these things. Sukkah, mavoy, the alley, the birois, the well. He even says it can't be a goylel for a kever. It can't be used as some type of a covering for a grave. And then he said they brought an opinion of Rabbi Yisrael Galili. You can't even write a get on top of an animal. If a person wants to give his wife a divorce, Chas v'shalom, he could consider writing it on an animal. Oh, Rabbi Yisrael says, no, you can't do that. You can't write it on an animal and then hand her the animal. You can't do such a thing. So all of these things are not usable. You can't use an animal. Now, the Gemara has no problem with the fact you can't use an animal for a sukkah or for a mavoy or for birois for the well. All of these things you could say there's a rabbinic decree that you can't do it. Biblically, maybe it's fine, but rabbinically, there's an issue with it. The problem is when it says you can't be goylel, you can't use it as a goylel a kever. That's where it gets a little tricky. And that's what the Gemara here is bothered with. And the Gemara doesn't actually use that brisa to show the problem. The Gemara spells it out even more clear from another source. And let's learn it inside. But basically, it's the same question. You could ask it on that previous uh, brisa that we had before in page 23a. The Gemara here on 24a asks very similar question, but it bases it on a Mishnah. And the commentaries wonder why doesn't it just bring the previous source that we had a page before? Could ask the same question. The commentaries say here it's a little more spelled out. Even Rashi asks this question, and basically here it spells it out more clear. Now, what is the question? The question is that all the reasons that we had, we're afraid the animal might die, the animal might run away. These were all rabbinic decrees of why you can't use an animal for a wall for a sukkah. But biblically, you could use an animal for a wall for a sukkah. The problem becomes when you start dealing with a biblical law that says that there's a rule that a covering for a grave becomes tamei, impure. That's a biblical law. And then you want to tell me, guess what? You can't use an animal is not tamei. What you've done is you've now taken this rabbinic decree, which normally means you're using it to be more machmir, strict. And now what you've done is taken a rabbinic decree and said, let's use it to be more lenient. Now, the rabbis don't come around and give you leniencies on biblical laws. They come to protect biblical laws. So they're not going to come around and say, oh, this is tamei. You know what? Rabbinically, it's not tamei. They don't say such things. If biblically something is impure, then they can't go around and say, oh, rabbinically, we said it's not. That's not their job, and they don't have the ability and the rights to do that. What they do have the right to do is to say, oh, biblically something is not impure. You know what? We're considering it impure because we got to put a protection on the biblical laws. And if you think if you're going to use this, which is biblically okay, you might end up making a mistake and you might mix it up with something. That also is impure rabbinically. They're gonna add a rule. So the rabbis add rules to add strictness to the biblical laws. They're not here to make leniencies on the biblical laws because they don't even have the right to do that. There are scenarios where you do find one here and there some type of case that sounds like the rabbis had some type of ability to do something like that. And generally, all the commentaries try to have to explain why would that be. For example, the cases in monetary laws, the rabbis, how did they take away the money from one person and give it to the other person if biblically the money should be by one person? And there are cases where it's called hefker bezdin hefker, like the rabbis made the money ownerless or something. But generally, or almost throughout the whole Shas, you don't find the rabbis ever making something more lenient from the biblical law. So here, the question is, if you want to be strict when it comes to an animal and say, you know what, an animal is not a good wall, that works for all cases where biblically the animal is a good wall. And the rabbi said you can't use it for a wall. But what about something that's the laws of purity and impurity, and biblically it's considered a wall and it's impure, and the rabbis can't come along and say it's not impure. And we have and in our case, the rabbi said it's not a goylo. It can't be used as a goylo, which means a wall that covers a grave. It can't be used as some type of a wall that covers a grave. We gave 3 examples, 3 pshatim of what that wall consists of. What is this goylo? It's either the covering on top of a casket or a coffin, or it's the covering to a cave that has a body inside the cave buried, or it has, or it's more like a monument on top of a grave. But in all these cases, biblically, the goylel has a chumrah, has a strictness that the goylel is tamei. And what happens if you put an animal there, and you had an animal there like as a sign that this is the burial place of a person you just buried, or it's the cover you had. That's all you had to do to use as a cover for the casket. So would that be considered tamei? And we just said that it's not. It's an animal. Animal's not tamei. That's a rabbinic. It seems like it's a rabbinic thing. How could you say such a thing when it comes to a biblical law? So the Gemara here asks, let's read it. Let's learn it inside. We're on page 24a. And we're going to start. I'm going to start again from where it says, Bein Laman Amar Shema Thomas. It's about 12 lines up from the bottom of the page. Bein Laman Amar Shema Thomas. Whether, according to the opinion, that we're afraid that an animal might die, and therefore we say you can't use an animal as a wall for a sukkah. Bein Laman Amar Shema Tivrach, or whether the other opinion that says the concern about using an animal is that it might run away, and that's why you can't use an animal. And this was all in the opinion of Reb Meir. Reb Yehuda argued and said you could use an animal for the sukkah, for the wall of a sukkah. But all of these reasons of Reb Meir that you can't use it either because it might die, it might run away, midaraisa machitza ma'al yehi. what you're basically saying is that biblically it is a mechitza ma'alya. It is a proper mechitza. It's a good mechitza. It's a good wall, biblically. V'rabbanan hu degazruba, and the rabbis made a decree about this item. And they said because it might die, it might run away, we can't use it. It's not good. It's going to end up. You're going to end up eating inside a structure that's not a kosher sukkah, and you won't know about it. So the rabbis prohibited it. They made a decree against it. According to both reasons, it's rabbinic. Elamayata, if so, Remeir Titami Mishum Goylel, if so, that biblically a animal is a decent wall. It's only a rabbinic addition that it's not. So if so, it should become Tameh, impure, from Goylel, from the law of Goylel. Goylel is a special law that has to do with impurity. In fact, those people that learned one chapter of Rambam, they just learned about it yesterday, that the Goylel, it just mentioned, we just started the chapter, that the book in the Rambam about Maimonides, about the laws of Tumah, impurity and impurity, and the laws of Tahara. And it mentions there about the Goylel, that a Goylel, this some type of a covering for a grave, is Tameh, that there's a special law that Goylel is Tameh. And similar to the grave itself, similar to the dead body itself. And so the question is, if it's so that the problem of an animal is only a rabbinic decree, but otherwise an animal could be a regular wall, so therefore it should also be tameh, it should be impure for the reason called goylel, as a covering for a grave. Allah matnan, why did we learn in a Mishnah? And the Mishnah says, Rabbi Yehuda metame mishum goylo. Rabbi Meir metayim. Rabbi Yehuda says that a animal is tameh if it's used as a goylo, as this covering for a grave. Rabbi Meir metaher, and Rabbi Meir says that it is tahar, it is pure, if it's used as a covering for a grave, and it doesn't become what's called goylo. Again, there's a biblical law about goylo, and the biblical law of goylo, Reb Meir says, won't affect a animal. The animal can't become goylo. Of course, a piece of wood could, or other items could become the goylo, but an animal can't. An animal can't be considered a goylo. And it's not tameh. Now, if it's not tameh, if an animal can't be tameh for a goylo, if Yehuda says it could be tameh for a goylo, Reb Meir says it can't be tameh because of goylo. Now, what would the reason of Reb Meir be that it can't be tameh from goylo? If he's saying that it can't be tameh from goylo, he must understand the Torah, that an animal, something that's live or something that's an animal, is biblically excluded. He must have some exclusion biblically. So you can't come up with some reason, it's an animal's not a good wall, it's a problematic, we're afraid of something. No, there must be something much more internally wrong with using an animal, and that's why Reb Meir would say, guess what? It's not even going to be tameh. Even though biblically goylel is tameh, this animal can't be goylel. It can't be a rabbinic law, because if it was a rabbinic law, then when it comes to biblical things, it would have to be tameh. And so, in other words, the Gemara has no problem if Reb Meir would only say his thing about the laws of Sukkah, the laws of Eruv. These are rabbinic rules that Reb Meir could easily get away with saying that it's not a good wall, an animal. And he could say these are rabbinic laws, and then he says an animal isn't good. But if Reb Meir is saying that it actually does not receive impurity for a goylo, if it's used as a covering for a grave, he must be saying that something's internally wrong, not just rabbinically, but biblically wrong with using an animal for these things. And it's not just a concern of Shema Yivrach, Shema Tomos, maybe it'll run away, maybe it'll die. This is not a rabbinic problem. So Ella Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov. So comes Rav Acha bar Yaakov and says, guess what? All the details that we were understanding until now about Shema Tomos, have made a whole big thing about, oh, why are we afraid it's going to die? Why aren't we afraid about the breaking of the wineskin? Why are we? Is it Reb Meir who's afraid, or Reb Yehuda who's afraid that something of that? Guess what? All of that we're now pushing aside. We've got a whole new reason why an animal is not kosher for a sukkah. Not because we're afraid it's going to die. It's a different reason. What is the reason? So the Gemara has two options. It has to be a biblical problem. That biblically a wall is not going to be a good for a sukkah. An animal will not be a good wall for a sukkah. What's the problem biblically? So the Gemara says that Ella Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Rav Acha bar Yaakov says Kasava Reb Meir holds Kol Mechitza She'imedas Beruach. Any wall that is standing because of ruach, because of air, if that's what's causing it to stand, eina mechitza. That's not called a mechitza. So if you have a blow up sukkah that has to be blown up, according to this, it's the only thing that's keeping it standing is the fact that you blew it up, like those bounce house sukkahs. If you have a bounce house sukkah that it's being blown up, it's being held up by air, otherwise it falls right down to the ground flat. And so what's holding it up is the ruach. That's not called a wall. You can't say that that's a wall. It's being held up by air. Lav mechitzahi. Rashi adds the word. It's standing up is a davar she'ein boy mamish. It's something that doesn't have any substance to it. It has no substance to it. It's air. And so a mechitza that's standing in because of air, that's not a mechitza. That's one explanation. Ika di Amri, some say Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov, Kasavar Reb Meir holds, Kol mechitza she'eina asuya b'dei adam eina mechitza. Some say that there was another explanation that Rav Acha bar Yaakov gave. That the reason explaining Reb Meir's law that an animal is not, it can't be used for all these things, and it's also not a goylo. So what's the reason? Because a mechitza that's not made by man is not a mechitza. And what that refers to is that there's a ruach chayim, there's a breath of life in the animal. And the person cannot do that. A person can't give the animal a breath of life. So the mechitza that's made by could not be made by man, that would not be a mechitza. Commentaries talk about, what about a mountain? Use a mountain. I mean, it's not really made by man. Is that you can use that as a mechitza? Can you use a hill as a mechitza? So that, of course, you could use as a mechitza. So how does that work? So the commentaries explain that they bring a Tosfos and Eruvin, that basically you could make that hill. You could build a hill, and you could build a mountain, but you can't put a life into an animal. So the animal is standing because it's has a ruach chayim, it has a breath of life. So that would not be a kosher for a wall, because it's not made by man. It's not something man could make. So that's
So
what it
Rabbi,
means.
your example before, the
Yep.
blow up wall is not, it's not the same as this
Right.
animal, right? The blow up wall that you blew
Yeah.
up, whatever, that was made by man.
Yes.
But the
Yeah.
animal, to keep
Right.
it alive, we'd have no way. We can't make we can't take things and make
An
them
animal.
alive,
Right.
right? So the
The
blow up wall might still be okay.
so there's two explanations that the Gemara just gave. The first one is, why is an animal not good for all these things? So the first explanation the Gemara gave was that it's a davar she'ein boy mamish. Its existence is from air. We're not talking about the fact that it has a soul, but it has oxygen inside it, and it's being held up by air, similar to what my example of a blow up sukkah. And such a thing is called a davar she'ein boy mamish. It has no substance to it. Your sukkah is leaning on top of this type of thing. That wouldn't be a good sukkah. It's a medes. It's a medes beruach. This is not considered a good wall. Then the Gemara says, or you might say another pshat. The other pshat is not to do with oxygen or air, that your blood is being held up by air. A different pshat is that it has to do with something can't be made by man. And something that can't be made by man, that is not considered a mechitza. And so that second pshat would be that would imply that would come out that our example of a blow up sukkah would work, because that is made by man. Just an animal wouldn't be kosher. So the Gemara gives it a different. The Gemara says this. The Gemara says. So first the Gemara said, "Kol mechitza sha'imedes beruach ina mechitza," and then it said, "Ika da amri." Some say a little different, and the different one shot was it's a mechitza she'ena suya b'dei adam ina mechitza. It's not made by man. And then the Gemara says, "My beinayu." 2 lines up from the bottom of the page. My beinayu. What is the difference between these two reasonings, these two understandings of Reb Meir's of why biblically an animal's not a good wall? So the difference between these two understandings is Ika beinayu de ukma benoid tapuach, that you stood the wall on top of a blow up wineskin. So you blew up a wineskin, and you have the wall of the sukkah on top of this wineskin, and you're leaning on it on this wineskin. So that would not be a kosher. Well, depends. So Laman de Amar, according to the opinion that mechitza medes beruach in a mechitza, that a mechitza that's standing because of air, that's not considered a mechitza. So this is standing because of air. It's this is standing because of air, and this would not be a kosher wall for a mechitza. For a sukkah, it wouldn't be considered a goylel. It wouldn't be considered an eruv. Now, however, Lamanda Amar Eina Suya B'dei Adam, but according to the opinion that the problem with an animal is that the animal is not made by man, meaning a person can't make this animal. So it's something that's Eina Suya B'dei Adam. So Hare Asuya B'dei Adam. This Noi Tapuach, this wineskin that's blown up, that is doable by man, meaning you can blow it up and you make it. So therefore, it is considered to be a mechitza. So this would be the difference between these two interpretations of Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, which we're not sure which one he said, but it comes out that the using it would seem like at least a blow up sukkah could be a difference between these two interpretations. I'm not sure if these are brought lahalacha, these two interpretations, because the psak is that Rabbi Yehuda says an animal is matame mishum goylo. It seems like that's the halacha, that an animal is matame. So we don't seem to follow Rav Meir in this. So so the whole problem that we had with Rav Meir, that how could he say that an animal is not a goylo? The whole thing doesn't really apply, because the halacha follows Rav Yehuda's view, which is the other view, which and about using an animal for a sukkah. It seems like the halacha also follows Rabbi Yehuda there, that an animal could be used for a sukkah. So all of these don't seem to have a applicable ruling. In other words, can you use a blow up sukkah? It would seem like you could. What we were discussing was in the opinion of Reb Meir. In the opinion of Reb Meir, it could be that you can't, but that's not the actual halacha. So don't go around screaming at people when you see a blow up sukkah saying, "Oh, we learned in Gemara you can't." That's not true. We learned in Gemara that according to Reb Meir, there could be a problem with a blow up sukkah. But again, we don't follow Reb Meir. Reb Meir is not the final halacha. Reb Yehuda, we normally paskin, like whenever there's an argument with Meir, Reb Yehuda, we generally follow Reb Yehuda. So and here as well, we follow Reb Yehuda. So therefore, it's not really la halacha. This is not a halachic conclusion. This is just this is just a discussion in the opinion of Reb Meir. Okay, so it is interesting that if you don't paskin like Reb Meir, why do we have so much discussion? There is such a concept that if the Gemara discusses such a view, has a whole long discussion about a view, generally that is the halacha. There could be reason to follow such a to follow that as the halacha. So that's something that we would have to look into, see if any of the poskim do seem to paskin that way. Again, our Gemara seem to discuss their views. What's the difference between the reasonings of Reb Meir's view? It seemed to discuss Reb Meir a lot. Of course, it was also discussing Reb Yehuda, but it seemed to put emphasis on Reb Meir's view. Even now, the Gemara goes back and says, "You mentioned these reasons of Reb Meir. What about it doesn't fit with another statement of Reb Meir?" So the Gemara does seem to be discussing Reb Meir, which gives a little validity to his view, as if maybe it should be considered lahalacha. So it deserves to be looked into. Sometimes you do find that some of the poskim paskin one way, some of the poskim give a verdict the other way, because you also have the rule that Reb Meir, Reb Yehuda, we follow Reb Yehuda. So you got these two contradictory ways of coming up with the verdict. So there's reason to look at it either way. But from the Gemara, generally you can tell who the halacha in Shulchan Aruch is, because there's normally a little letter that directs you to where it is in Shulchan Aruch, and that little letter they normally put on the final halacha. It's not always this way, but it often is this way, that the Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah, whoever wrote that on the side of the Gemara, it's called the Ein Mishpat Ner Mitzvah. So they that rabbi, he connected where it is in Shulchan Aruch, and he normally puts his little letter on the view that's the accepted halacha in Shulchan Aruch, sort of like connecting you. See this line in the Gemara? That's here in Shulchan Aruch. So he's not going to put it where it's the opposite law. He's going to put it where this is the actual law that's written in the Shulchan Aruch. He's going to put his little letter there. So if you look in your Gemara on page 24a, and you see on the bottom over there, it's 8 lines up from the bottom, where it says Reb Yehuda Metame. You see a little aleph over there? Reb Yehuda Metame. It would be 8 lines up from the bottom of the page on 24a in the Hebrew side, in the Hebrew only side. So 8 lines up. So there should be a little aleph there where it says Metame, the word Metame on the 8th line up from the bottom of the page. So if you see that, that aleph takes you to the side of the Gemara on the left side, to the top where it says Maimen Perek Vav Mehilchas Tumas Meis Halacha Daled, that he directs you to the Rambam where the Rambam gives his psak. And why does he put the aleph where it says Reb Yehuda Metame? He could have put the aleph where it says Reb Meir Metaher. It must be he's putting the aleph over there. Generally, it's because that's the statement that the Rambam brings is the Metame one, not the Metaher one on the next line, but the Metame one on this line. So therefore, it sounds like the Rambam paskins like Rabbi Yehuda, who's Metame. So that's without looking into the Rambam, just looking in our Gemara, you get a little hint to who it is, but it's not 100% always that way. So it is always good to look it up and see. And sometimes there's discussion, there's qualifications to it that you don't necessarily see in our Gemara. So therefore, it's always good to look it up and to see what it's not 100% always that you can't always assume. You do have to do your homework and look it up. Okay, I think someone has a question. There's someone under the name of Zoom user. Is that a question? Do you have a question? If you have a question, you can speak. Okay, guess not. Okay, David.
Yeah, we were learning a few days ago about using an animal as a wall. We're learning about using an elephant. I'm just wondering about how common was that a person had an elephant that he would use as a wall in Babylonia or Iraq or wherever this was taking place, or in Israel.
Yeah, it's above my pay grade. I don't, if I knew such history, I would be a historian and a professor in college.
Okay,
maybe.
That was my question.
Yeah. I would write Rabbi Steinsaltz's. I would write another side column in Rabbi Steinsaltz's Gemara if I knew that type of information. Yeah, so I don't know. Okay. So the Gemara. So we just turned the page 24b, and we've explained that Reb Meir's reason for not allowing an animal to be a mechitza, to be a goylel, to be a wall for a sukkah, to be a wall for an eruv, a lechi for an eruv, a pole, can't use it for a pasi birois, for the well, be able to carry, use an animal as a corner for the mechitza around the well, or you can't use it for goylel. All these things, it has to do with the fact that an animal is either something that's considered blown up, and it's not a real wall. It doesn't have enough substance to it, or it is something that's not doable by man, and therefore it's not considered a wall. And the Gemara now says that if you look back in the Brisa on page 23a, the Gemara talked about all these cases, and that Reb Meir mentioned that are not good walls. And one of them was the goylel thing. He says you can't use an animal for a wall for a kever, and for a goylel for a kever. You can't use the animal for that. You can't use it in all these cases. And then it said another thing that you can't. That according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, in the name of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, it was said that you can't use this animal to write a divorce document on. And the question is, why not? Seemingly, whatever you can get, whatever this person can write on should be good. Maybe. Why can't they? You can't use an animal? and it sounds like it might be an argument because they said Rabbi Yossi Aglili says this, and it was said in the name of Rabbi Yossi Aglili that it doesn't work if you write a person writes a divorce document on a animal, it won't work. It sounds like maybe other rabbis arguing. We'll see shortly that it's a brisa with the Gemara that it understands that not only Rabbi Yossi Aglili but the rabbis argue, and they disagree, and that you could use an animal and write on an animal as a divorce document. So the Gemara says, we're on page 24b on the top line. Amar Mar, Master said, Mishum Rabbi Yossi Aglili Amru, in the name of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, it was stated, Af ein kaisven olav gitei nashim. Also, cannot be written on anything that's alive, like an animal, gitei nashim, a get of women. Now, the reason why it says gitei nashim, I would assume, why does it say a get of women? Because there's also a concept of a get by avodim, maybe. But the term used is gitei nashim, a get, a divorce document for, well, actually for avodim, it's called shechrurei avodim. I don't know if it would be called a get for avodim. Anyway, the term for a get is called gitei nashim, because the husband divorces the wife, so it's the divorce of a woman. So the Gemara asks, my time, why is it that you can't write on why can't you write on an animal according to Rabbi Yossi? My time to Rabbi Yossi, the Tanya, because it was taught in a brisa, it was taught in a statement, in a teaching of the Talmudic, of the Mishnaic rabbis, that says by a get, sefer, the word in the Torah, it says sefer, and because it says that he writes to her a sefer krisos, and literally it would mean he writes to her a book of divorce, and he gives it in her hand, v'nasan biyada. So v'kasav la sefer krisos v'nasan biyada. That's the pasuk in Deuteronomy, where it says, I think it's Kiseitse, where it says that he finds some type of a reason to divorce her, and he writes to her a sefer krisos, a book of divorce, and he puts it in her hand, gives it to her hand, and that is considered the laws of divorce. There's a whole tractate in the Talmud about divorce. It's based on these few words. So the Gemara says sefer. He uses the word sefer. Has to be a book of divorce. Ainli ella sefer. I would think that it has to be an actual book, like at least written on klaf, which means parchment. At least that would be the understanding, that maybe it has to be like a sefer. In those days, the books were written on parchment, and that would be the meaning of sefer. So minayin l'rabbis called over. How would you know to include anything that if you wrote it on top of some type of tablet or piece of wood? How do you know that other things could be okay? Rashi gives examples: a luach eitz, a board of wood, an ale shel zayis, a leaf of an olive tree. So it sounds like that might have been used for paper in those days. Olive leaves, not really sure. Are olive leaves large? Not really. Yes. Yeah. Oh, they are. Okay, good. So it says, sounds like it was something that was commonly used, I guess. So the Gemara says, how do we know? The Brisa says, how do we know that you could even use those things for a divorce? So Talmud Loimar b'kasav law, the Torah, the verse lets us know that it's okay because it says v'kasav law, which sounds extra. It could have just said he gives in her hand a sefer krisos, and it doesn't have to say v'kasav law sefer krisos v'natan biyad. It's a little, it's verbose, and these words are really not necessary. Kosav, law, sefer, krisus. Just say, V'nasan b'yado sefer krisus. Who puts in her hand a book of divorce. Why does it say V'kosav law, he writes? It's adding that you could write on other items as well. V'kosav law, mikol makam, in general, on anything that that teaches you that you could write on other things. So that if so, why does it say sefer? If you could write on anything, you became matamud leimer sefer. So why does it say sefer? So it says ma sefer davar shein b'ruach chayim. It says sefer to exclude an animal that's alive. Something that it excludes something. It says sefer because just like a sefer, a book is something that's not alive. It's ein b'ruach chayim. It doesn't have a breath of life. The eino yoichel, and it's not edible. So af kol davar. So also anything she'ein b'ruach chayim ve'eino yoichel, anything that's not doesn't have a breath of life and it's not food. So that also anything that doesn't fall into those categories is usable to write on it a divorce. So what isn't usable for a divorce? What's not usable is things that are not similar to a sefer. They're not similar to a parchment. What would that be? Food and something that's alive. Both of these things you could not write on. So basically, what the Gemara's understanding is that we have one place in the one word of this verse that talks about divorce. It says sefer, which makes it sound like it has to be specifically parchment. On the other hand, it also has extra words that say v'kosav law, which sound like you could write on anything. Right there. So the Gemara understands. So the Brisa teaches, or at least Rabbi Yitzchok Lili learns from this, that it has to be, you could write on almost anything, but not anything. It has to be similar to sefer. So we have this word sefer, and the kosav law almost includes everything, but sefer, it limits it to something that's similar to parchment, can't be alive, and it can't be food. Now, the Taisvis is very bothered over here. He says, if you look at this verse, what does the verse say? The verse says, "V'kosav la sefer krisus." He writes for her a book of divorce. V'kosav, the Gemara understands to be a generic, a general concept of writing. You could write on anything. And the word sefer, the parchment, it limits it to parchment. Now, what do we say in the davening when we talk about klal uprat in the korbanos before davening? When you learn about when you read that last paragraph,
general specific, right?
What does it say over there? So over there it says that there's 13 ways that the Torah can be deduced. You could derive things from the Torah, and you could derive laws from different ways. One of them is a kal v'chomer, a gezerah shava, a binyanav kosav echad, binyav shtei ksuvim. And then it says there's klal uprat, and there's prat uklal, and then there's klal uprat uklal. Now, what is the rule of klal uprat? What does klal uprat mean? Klal uprat means when the Torah gives a very general example, and then it gives a very specific example. So if the Torah says something very general, you write a divorce, and then it says in a book. So what would that mean? That the divorce has to be specifically in a book. That's the understanding of that type. In other words, this is the code language. This is the code for the Torah language. This is the code book, how to decipher the Torah, the meaning of the Torah. So the way to decipher it is really something that we're supposed to read every day before davening and the preliminaries for the morning prayers. And what it says over there is klal uprat, that when you have a klal, a general statement, and then you have a specific example, the Torah is saying that it's specifically ein bichlal elamasha b'prat. You don't have in this general rule only what the Torah exactly specifies is meant. It's meant for. So this teaching that the Gemara just gave us here about a divorce, that it could be, initially it sounds like could be on anything. And then the Torah says, no, it has to be specifically a sefer, klaf. So our Gemara says, oh, you know what? Anything similar to klaf is good. It includes everything really. Just a few small things that aren't included. That the food or something that is alive. But otherwise, everything is fine because you know what? The Torah gives a general rule. Everything's included. Oh, it has a specific thing. Yeah, that's excluding a few small things that are similar to that small thing. Tosfos asks, what are you talking about? There's a way to darshan things. There's a way the Torah gives us the code book. We got the code book. In the code book, it says that when you have a general thing first, and then you have a specific, that's all that's accepted. So Tosfos answers very interesting that the Gemara doesn't spell this out, but Tosfos says that really this is a klal uprat uklal here. That it's not just these words. The Gemara did sort of left out, but the fact is that it also says v'nasan biyada, and that's also like puts anything in her hand. In other words, it gives a general. It doesn't say v'nasan to the sefer biyada, so it puts the book in the hand. It just says v'nasan biyada, and what it sounds, what it basically is doing is it's called klal uprat uklal. So instead of being, from the fourth code that we talk about 13 codes. So there's the fourth one that's called klal uprat, and the fifth one is called prat uklal. That would be like in the opposite type of case where it first says a specific and then it says a general. And then there's the sixth code that's called klal uprat uklal.
But Rabbi, question.
Klal uprat uklal is general rule, a specific rule, a general rule, and then anything similar to the prat, that would be how you understand it. So this is the answer of Tosfos, is that if you look at the wording in this pasuk, it's really klal uprat uklal, and therefore you have a general rule, a specific rule, and a general rule that would be acceptable, and that would be the understanding here of Rabbi Yossi Hagalili. Yes, Ezra.
Yeah, but the word natan, to give it, is given in the masculine, which goes with the sefer. Therefore, there is no a second klal. You're actually talking about the prat.
I think whenever the Torah uses this concept of klal, it means that because the Torah didn't specify,
But it did.
it didn't say v'nasan sefer biyada. It just says v'nasan, and it gave.
The fact that the word natan agrees in terms of the gender with the word sefer, that's exactly what it's saying. It's talking about.
Right. And what about v'kosav? V'kosav la? That's
Okay,
the same thing.
Okay, so
you're saying because of, I think whenever the Torah says a klal, and then a prat, and then
it's about the husband. He writes. La sefer kritut v'natan. Okay, he gives what? What does he give?
And what does he write?
The sefer kritut.
Right. So whenever you have the rule, I think the way the code works is that it always flows with the wording of Torah. It's not that it doesn't flow, but the fact is that it uses a generic, it uses it in a more general sense, and it doesn't specify here, and it doesn't specify there. So therefore, the Gemara understands it that it's considered a general rule instead of a specific. So in other words, you're right that it flows with it. It flows together. But I think that's the general understanding whenever in the code language, if the Torah is that's called the general and this is called the specific, and otherwise the Torah should have specified it again. It should have again specified if it only wanted that.
Right,
Okay, in any event, that's Tosfos's the little input over here. And
if that wasn't if it wasn't a klal, it should have said v'natana sefer biyada.
Basically, it should just said v'nasa. It should have skipped out any extra word and just put it there because there's the extra word. So we look at it as a klal, and then we have the prat, and then you have another. And according to Tosfos, you have this other klal, and therefore the Gemara, Rabbi Yossi Aglili can learn it this way. So the bottom line is, according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, can you use an animal as a divorce document? No, you can't use an animal as a divorce document. Rabbanan. And what about the rabbis? So the rabbis argue on Rabbi Yossi Aglili, and they hold that, guess what? You could use an animal as a divorce document. How do they learn the pasuk? So they learn it. Ikasav bisefer keduka amri. If it's said bisefer, then it would be like you're saying that it sounds like it's talking about he has to write inside a document that he's divorcing her. But that's not the way the rabbis see it. Hashta d'chsiv sefer, now that it says sefer, not bisefer, so there's another way to translate sefer. And the rabbis translate it that it's not that it's referring to like a document of parchment. It says sefer, which means l'sfiras dvarim ba'al mahudasa, that he writes these words. In other words, writes the story that he's divorcing her. That's what it's saying. Not the sefer, not a book. It's about the words, the sipur, the happening. So in other words, the husband has to write the words that show that he's separating between himself and her, which is the main words of a divorce. Harei at muteres l'chol adam is the words of a divorce. You are permitted to all men, that you are no longer married to me and limited to me. You are now permitted to all men. And the husband has to write these words and it doesn't mean in a sefer. And therefore, you don't have this whole limud, this whole thing. Oh, it has to be similar to parchment, or it has to be specifically on parchment. It can't be on an animal. No, it doesn't say anything like that. You're right. You write to her. Doesn't even say about what it's written on. So the Gemara asks, Rabbanon, and the rabbis, hi v'kosav, my darshibe. What do they learn from the fact that it says v'kosav, that it seemingly could have skipped the word v'kosav? So what do they learn from v'kosav? In other words, the way we explained it in Rabbi Yossi Aglili, v'kosav adds anything similar. That it's v'kosav law was the general rule that was adding all different types of things that are similar. That what are we learning from v'kosav? So the Gemara says that hahu miboy lahu b'chsiva miskareshes, that it does need to be written ve'ena miskareshes b'kesef. In other words, with writing, she is divorced, and she is not divorced b'kesef. She is not divorced with money. If he gives her money and says, with this money you are divorced, that doesn't work. Why would you think it works if you give her money?
Because you got married.
When you marry, you can marry with money.
Right. So Salka Daita Chamina, it would have gone up in your mind to say that Hoyol v'iska shetzio lahavoya, since it does compare the two, that she leaves you and she goes and marries someone else. So there's a comparison divorce in marriage. Ma havoya bekesef, just like when she marries the next person, it says she becomes married. She gets married to someone else, and that's with money. So you might think ap yitzia bekesef, also the divorce is with money. Lamash Malon, it comes and lets us hear that that is not so. And the divorce is not with money. It's specifically with a document of divorce. And can't be with money. Okay, we're going to stop here. Zygazund,
right.
everyone.
Thank you,
Rabbi,
Rabbi.
I
Thank
found
you,
the answer to
Rabbi.
my question.
Say that
Bye-bye.
again.
Rabbi, I
Bye-bye.
found the answer to my question
Oh, what was, yeah, what
Yeah.
was your question again?
about the elephant.
Oh, so yeah, well, what did you
So-
find?
There's an artificial intelligence program called Copilot by Microsoft.
Okay.
So I just asked it in the Talmud tractate Sukkah. It's discussed using an animal as a wall for a sukkah, and discusses using an elephant as a wall for a sukkah. How common were elephants in Babylonia at the time of the Talmud? So it answers, elephants were not common in Babylonia during the time of the Talmud was written. The Talmudic discussion about using an elephant as a wall for a sukkah are more theoretical and serve to explore the boundaries of halacha rather than reflecting the everyday reality of Babylonia. Elephants were more commonly found in regions like India and Africa, and their presence in Babylonia would have been quite rare.
So listen, I could have told you all of that myself, but the question is, what is the truth? They're just that's just that anyone could have told you. You could have said the same thing. Probably not. It probably was theoretical. They don't really know any more than you, so I don't consider that a good enough.
Well, actually, they give you a source. The
Yeah, what's the source?
is okay. There's the source is there's a book called the Cambridge History of Judaism, in chapter 33, the formation and character of the Babylonian Talmud, and there it discusses all of this.
I wouldn't
Well,
trust anything out of Cambridge. I wouldn't
Yeah.
trust-
That means
And-
absolutely nothing.
Oh, okay.
That source. So they could dream it up as much as we could dream a lot better than them. But logically, that would be the simple answer. But the question is, what truly, were there elephants in those days? That really deserves to be, looked into. Anyway, especially
Well,
because
there
we know
were
the war.
there were
And this I
elephants
will
during the
tell you.
Hanukkah story.
I was just going to say that Mordechai has a very good point. That if you think about it, the truth of the matter is they're probably wrong, because we know from the Hanukkah story that there were elephants, and that the Greeks used elephants to fight the Greek Syrian army, the Seleucid army. They fought the Jewish people with elephants, and the Maccabees figured out what no one knew in those days was how to actually kill an elephant, and that was through slicing it up its belly, and it falls down and slams down, and they figured that out, and that's what they needed to do. So it does sound like there were more elephants there, and they probably killed them out, and that's why there were no elephants in and that's why the co-pilot thinks there's no elephants there, but there probably were elephants and they just got killed.
Well,
That makes a lot more sense. Thank you, Mordechai. Mordechai really is has the correct history.
But Hannibal attacked the Roman legions using elephants, so that was around the time of the writing of the Mishnah. So
Right.
So therefore, they had all that information.
They
So
had.
to say that it didn't, it doesn't make any sense.
No, that there were elephants then.
Yes,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
I'm saying is that for Cambridge to say there weren't, that nobody saw whatever, that's not.
Cambridge doesn't
Don't bring
say
that again
Cambridge-
anymore.
Cambridge-
Please don't bring
no,
that.
Oh,
source.
Cambridge.
Cambridge
We don't
Cambridge doesn't
buy
say
anything
that.
from Cambridge.
Cambridge doesn't say that. Cambridge is talking about the use of theoreticals as opposed to reality. But this source is very good, because if you would come back and tell them what you just said, they would stand corrected. They're not. It's
Arrogant?
artificial.
Co-pilot is not
artificial
arrogant.
It's artificial
Okay.
intelligence. So
They're humble.
I've told it sometimes things, and it says, "I stand corrected." Yeah.
Okay, so now you can tell it this as well. So it'll correct itself.
Yes. But a lot of
Anyway,
times
well-
it's, a lot of times
Yeah.
it's, a lot of
Thank
times
you.
it's reliable because of a lot of
Only
times.
thing, David, is after you tell it it's wrong, I'd like you to ask the question again and see if it says the same wrong thing that it said the first time.
Okay. A lot of times, like for
Tigers
instance,
on-
I ask it a halacha and it sources it in halachapedia. So it sources it in very good sources. Usually.
Right. All right. Anyway, sounds good.
Bye. Take care.
Tigers on. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Sukkah.